Hi, welcome to latest class. We're going to do part 2, actually doing the PHP version of our script. Now let me just get my file here. Which one did I use? Contactform PHP. This one. Okay, here we go. First thing we're going to do is we have our HTML page that we just completed. It consists of name, email, and a text area where they can leave a comment or ask a question or anything like that. Next, it's going to go, when you hit the submit button, it's going to go to your PHP page. And PHP, very simple, starts out PHP. So, what we're going to do here is we put our PHP in there, and then we can do our end PHP. These are your start tags, these are your finishing tags. Anyone that's not familiar with PHP or very vaguely familiar with PHP, everything starts with this, your arrow, question mark, PHP, and it ends with your question mark and an arrow. And everything goes in between this. The first thing we're going to do for our email comment box is we're going to say if is set post email, and then a semicolon. Now what this is going to do is when the submit button is hit on the previous page, it's going to come to here. Your browser is going to come to this page because the other page told it to, and it's going to check and make sure everything is set. And if everything is set that's in the code that we're going to write, then it will post this email. It will send this email. Another thing with PHP, semicolon, is at the end of every line. That tells the browser that you're done with that code. It's over. Go to the next line, the next code, whatever's after it, and continue. So now what we're going to do is we're going to do curly brackets. Very common with PHP, curly brackets. Define what codes to use, where they start, where they end. This particular code here, post email, we're going to have a curly bracket at the beginning, and we're going to have a curly bracket at the very end of the code. So everything that we put in between here, this is going to check. When the submit button is checked, it's going to go through the whole entire page of code, and if it's set, if everything's good, then it will send the email. And I'll explain a little bit more about that as we go. It probably doesn't make a whole lot of sense right now, but it will as we go on. The first thing we're going to do after this is we're just going to put in some reference codes. Actually, we're going to do email underscore 2 equals, and I'll just put in my email for now. And what that's going to do is at the end, when it gets to the code that's going to actually submit the email, it's going to come up here, email to, and this is where you want the email to be sent to. When they hit submit, the email is going to be sent, and this is going to tell the computer where to send it to, and this will send it to my address. Then we can do email underscore subject equals, I just put in video classes. That way, when I get an email, as you're familiar with if you've ever gotten an email, you open up your inbox and you have a whole list of all your emails that you got, and in the middle column there's a subject, and it tells you who it's from, maybe the name of a company, stuff like that. With this email subject, when it gets down to actually sending the email, it will put video classes in the subject. So when I open my inbox and I have a list of all my emails, if I see something that says video classes, then I know that's someone from my web page, and I can open it and read what their comment or question is, and I can reply to them as needed. We'll get back to that after in a little while when we get down to the end, when we actually send an email. I'll refresh you on what those are for. Now we're just going to do a couple of reference codes. These probably aren't going to make any sense to you at all unless you know PHP. But I'll explain them as we go and why we need them. Name equals post name semicolon. Same thing, we're going to do email equals post email, and same thing for text area. And that's it. Those are our three categories that are on our page: name, email, text area, as you remember from our HTML form. These probably don't mean much right now, but as we go on, they'll start to make a little more sense to you. Now the other thing is this page is pretty long. There's a couple big sections of code, not really big, but I'm going to copy and paste the sections one at a time and then go through them. I don't want to sit here for 10 or 15 minutes typing out all the codes. I'd rather just copy and paste them, and that will leave us more time to talk about them, and I can explain them better. So copy, come back to our form. Now these are what they call functions. Paste. We have three functions: function for name, a function for email, and a function for the text area. And what these do, it might look a little overwhelming, but these are pretty simple. What this means is when we get down to the next section, when we do our if statements, it's going to use these functions in the browser, like I'm using Firefox, is going to come to these functions and it's going to check. And what it says is function is name, return, peg match. Now, these symbols here just tell the browser that your code is starting. What's in between these brackets is what is going to be allowed in your code. And what that means is when someone enters their name in, let me just bring up our HTML form here. So we can see what's going on here. Just do localhost / contact form. Now when someone enters their name in here, whatever it is, Larry, Cody, anything like that, it's going to check. This function is going to check and make sure that only the characters that are in here are present in that name. Now what this means is, like I said, these just mean it begins. Your code A to Z, \D_\S. What that means is I'm actually going to change this because what D underscores means, it means capital letters and numbers. Now a name should not have numbers in it. You don't need numbers in a name. It's just letters. So we're going to do A to Z, A to Z, and spaces. So what that means is it's going to come up here. When they hit the submit button, it's going to come up here and it's going to check. It's going to go to the name they entered. Right here, whatever name they enter. And they hit submit. Then it's going to come down here and it's going to check. And if there's anything in the name besides A to Z small letters, A to Z capital letters, and space, S means space, you have a space between your first and last name. If there's any characters at all, anything at all, besides letters and spaces, it's going to kick out an error message saying that that's not allowed, it's not a valid name. And then this tells you it can be between 2 and 40 characters long, the name. And then this just says it ends. It just tells the browser that's the end of the code, end name. And then you have true and false. So what this means is when they hit submit, it's going to go to your name. It's going to check to see if only numbers and spaces are in there. I mean letters and spaces are entered. And it's between 2 and 40 characters. If that's true, then it's going to return true, and then it's going to continue on the code. Now when I write the next section of code, this will make a little more sense to you. If there's something in there besides letters and spaces, it's going to return false, and it's going to kick out an error message. Same thing with function is email, peg match, start. These are just all the symbols that are allowed in your email. If everything matches fine, it's true. If there's something in the email that's not in this list of codes that are allowed or characters that are allowed, kicks back a false and an error message. And same thing with function text area, does the same thing. A to Z, D underscore means capital A to Z and 0 through 9, spaces, periods, stuff like that, all the characters that are allowed. 3 to 1,000 characters. If everything's good, everything matches, it comes back true. If there's something in there that's not supposed to be in there, it will come back false. And that's going to bring us to our next section of code, which works in conjunction with this. Now you notice here we have name, email, text, name, email, text. All this has to match. It has to be exactly the same. Your name, your email, text area. What this means is name, $name, post, name. When you write this later on in the code, and actually that's going to come up in the next section I'm going to write, you're going to see post name. What that's telling the browser to do is to go back to the other page, this page here, and whatever name was entered, it's going to print it on the screen. Same thing with the email. Post email, whenever you see this in the codes, it's going to post the email that was entered. So that way, no matter what they enter, the text area, whatever they entered for a comment or a question, will show up on the page. Now the next section of code is going to be what they call if statements, which is right here. This is a little lengthy, so I don't want to waste a lot of time typing all this information out. It's just as easy to copy and paste it and explain it one at a time. Don't get overwhelmed. It looks like a lot, but it's really not. It's actually, once you break it down into sections, it's actually pretty simple. Alright, let's just save this. And let's go back up here. Now, first thing we got here, this is just to check for errors. Post your errors, errors equal this, and I'll explain that a little bit farther down the line. This part of the code goes with another section of code at the bottom, and what that does is if there's any errors on the page, it won't submit the email. Otherwise, if you don't have this here and the other section of code at the bottom, which I'll talk more about in a minute, what will happen is if there's an error on the page and they hit submit, it's going to show them, it's going to say there was an error. Your name can only contain letters and spaces. But on top of it just posting the error message, it's actually going to send you an email. So you don't want to receive emails every time someone makes a mistake on the form filling it out. So this and another code prevent that from happening. So we're going to just ignore this for now. I'll talk more about that when we get to the bottom of the page, where the rest of the code that goes with it is. First thing we're going to do is we're going to come down here, put a little space here. Now here we have name, is name, and name. So this section here goes with name and name. It's all going to match. Name, name, and name. And it's the same thing with the rest of them. What happened here? What did I just do? Alright, we just did something we don't need to do. Okay, here we go, we're back. Something copied it wasn't supposed to. Okay, so everything has to match. We have our post name, and you'll see right down here we have post name, and up here we have post name. So everything has to match. Same thing with email, and farther down we have our email. So our if statements, let's break this down. This is all just for the name. This whole section is for the name, and what it's going to do here is the first thing it does is starts out with if string length. That's what that code stands for. It's short for string length, which means how many characters are in the name. Right now I have 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So this string length is 10. If I remove this, now the string length is 0. So what it's checking here, if string length name equals 0, and then you have your opening curly bracket and your closing curly bracket with your error message in between. Error, period, equals, you must enter a name. So what's going to happen if someone comes up here and they don't enter a name, they just enter an email and a comment, and they hit submit, the first thing it's going to do is it's going to check to make sure that the string length is not 0. If the string length is 0, equals 0, then it's going to kick out this error code. Now, next thing it's going to do is if string length does not equal 0, if your string length, your characters, is anything, it could be 1. I don't know if we set a minimum on that. I think we set a minimum of 3 or something on that. But let's just say you put in your name and it's good, it's above 0. So it's going to come over here. If string length equals 0, it doesn't. So it's going to skip over that. They're only concerned if it's 0. If it's empty, it's going to say you must enter a name. Next, if it is not, this little punctuation mark right here, is not, that means no or not. If it's not set, his name is not, post name, error equals, name can only contain letters, underscore, and spaces. Actually, we changed this. We got rid of the underscore. We just made it letters and spaces. But that's irrelevant. So the first thing it does is it checks to make sure the name's not empty. If the name is empty, you'll get the error message, you must enter a name. The next thing it's going to do is it's going to check and make sure that there's no characters in the name that are illegal or not allowed. And it does that by right here, your is name. Right here, is name. This comes back to your function, your is name function. And what it's going to do is it's going to come up here and it's going to check A to Z in spaces, 2 to 40 characters. So it's going to check the name. If the name's good, capital letters, small letters, spaces, that's all that's allowed in the name. If that's good, it's going to skip that code and continue on to the next. If there's something in here that's not supposed to be, any codes like that that's not supposed to be in there, what it's going to do is it's going to come down here, it's going to say if else is not set. Now it's found characters that aren't allowed, so what it's going to do is it's going to return a false instead of a true. If only letters and spaces are in the name, it's going to return true. If there's something else in there that's not in this list, it's going to return false. And what that's going to do is that if it's not set, which it's not set because there's stuff in here that's not supposed to be, then it's going to print out an error code on your screen. Name can only contain letters and spaces. So that takes care of your error messages. So first it checks to make sure it's not empty. If it's empty, it says you must enter a name. Then it checks to see if there's characters in here that aren't supposed to be. And what this prevents is this prevents hackers from getting into your site. Now later down the road, if you have a comment, question box, or if you have a login box where you have people register, a name, a username, an email, a password, whatever, excuse me, and you have a database that stores this information, because you have to have a registration form that enters the information into a database so that when they come back and they click on login and they put in their username and their password, it's going to go to the database and make sure that username and password is correct, and if it is, it's going to allow you to continue. Now what happens is you have a database, say you could have credit card information, you could have names, phone numbers, addresses, emails, all kinds of stuff in this database that you don't want people to get access to. And what happens here is a hacker will come onto your website, click on this link, comment, question box, and they'll start entering codes in here. Now I don't know what the codes are that hackers use. I'm not a hacker, but I did some research on how to prevent hacking, but I really haven't looked into how hackers actually work. But I do know they enter a code in here. They could enter something in here, underscore $, post, get, info, whatever it is. I don't know exactly what it is. And they hit submit, and what that's going to do is it's going to trick your code, trick the browser into thinking that this is legit information. And next thing you know, these hackers have access to your database. They can go in and they can see who's registered on your website, if there's any information that's useful to them, if there's credit cards. They can copy the credit cards, they can use them, they can sell them, whatever they want to do. If they're an email hacker that likes to send out emails, they can take the email address of all your customers, and they can start sending them illegitimate emails. They can send them emails that look like they're from you, and then the people that your customers see, oh, this is from so-and-so, this is an okay email. They open it up. Next thing you know, they're downloading viruses, or it takes them to a web page where they're asked to buy something, stuff like that. So you want to prevent these hackers from getting into your website, into your database, stuff like that, to get rid of these codes. And that's what this section does. That's what these functions do. These functions say this name can only contain small letters, capital letters, and spaces. If there's anything else in there besides that, it's going to kick back the error code. And the error code for this is you must enter a valid name. Name, yep, right here. If it's not set, if it doesn't match exactly what's in your function, it is not set. So you get your little not sign here. Name can only contain letters and spaces. And then down here, if this is okay, if your string length is above 0, if your function codes match and this returns true, there's no problem. Then it goes on to the third step. Else, if is, here we have is not set, here we have is set. We didn't put that punctuation in there. So it's saying if it is set and everything's good, it passed through these two codes, and it comes to here, post name. And then echo. When you see echo, that's what's going to actually print on the screen. Echo means print, and then you have down here, you have entered this little sign here, if you remember from the HTML part of it. This means a space. Actually, you have to have that semicolon in there too. This means a space. So you have a little space between you have entered and then name, because this is going to tell it to post a name, whatever name is in here. When they hit submit, this is going to tell it to post that specific name. And that's it. that's how the name works. So it does three things. It checks to make sure that the name is not empty. Then it checks to make sure that your function, your codes, characters are within sync. And then it echoes, you have entered, and then your name. In this case, it would say you have entered Larry Cody. And that's it. That's how it works. So the next phase, it's pretty much the same thing. Your emails. Same thing here. If string length email is 0, you must enter an email address. Else if is not set your function for your emails. Right here, you get all your codes for your emails. If that comes back false, if it's not set, if there's something wrong, and then it will say echo error, it will print out you must enter a valid email. So you're actually giving them two different codes, two different options. You must enter an email if it's empty, and if there's something wrong with the email they entered, it says you must enter a valid email. And if both of these are true, that's all set. String length is above 0. Your function codes come out true. Then it goes to here. If is set, email, post email, echo. You have entered a space, email. Whatever email is entered in here. And they hit to submit. Aircraft F-18, you have entered space aircraft F-18. It will post the name, the email. Actually, we're down here, post email. So it's the same thing for the text area. Text area is the same thing, exactly same thing. It's actually one little thing that's different in the text area. Because we put in the text area in our HTML form, right here, minimum length 4, maximum length 100, whatever you want it to be. It could be 1,000. But right here we put minimum length, text area min length 4. So here, instead of string length email being 0 equals 0, we put if string length text area is less than, you have less than 4. Here we have equal to, and we have equal to there. So, here, and here's the other one, greater than. If string length error is greater than 0, so we have greater than, less than, and equal to. So here we have string length text area is less than 4 characters. Comment must contain 4 or more characters. That's what will come out. So if they're in the comment area, and they only do have, H-A-V, and they hit submit, they're going to get the error comment must contain 4 or more characters. If there's 4 or more, it goes on to the next step, else if, text area, post text area. If it's not set, back to your functions for comments, or for text areas, I mean. A to Z. D, this D underscore means capital letters and 0 to 9 numbers, space, period, so on. These are all the characters that are allowed. 3 to 1,000. This should actually be 4 to 1,000. Or 100, whatever you want it to be. And it's pretty much the same. If all the characters in your function are good, it goes on to the next phase. If there's a problem, if there's a character in the text area that's not allowed, comments must contain only alphabets, numbers, commas, spaces, punctuations. But if this is good, then it goes down to the next section. If is set, post text area, echo your comment is, and then post text area, whatever's in the text area, it will actually put your comment in there. So if someone puts in here, have a nice day, that's what will show up when they hit submit. Down here your comment is, have a nice day. I'm going to actually end this video here. We're going to take a quick break, and then I'll tell you about, this is the part I was telling you about earlier. If string length error is greater than 0, die. This goes back to that section I was talking about earlier with you, right here. Error equals. And we'll talk about that. And then we're going to post the code. I'm going to copy and paste the code that will actually send the email to you. And we'll talk about that. So let's take a quick break, and I'll see you in a couple of minutes.